So yeah, welcome everybody to another Lunchtime Listen. So Lunchtime Listens, our a programme that we've put on at Enquire to talk to different professionals, different experts across the children's sector, across children's rights. And today we're really grateful to be joined by Amy from Parenting Across Scotland. So we're going to be talking about what PAS do and how that aligns with what we do at Enquire. So Enquire is the Scottish Advice Service for Additional Support for Learning. So we focus on children's rights to education. Amy, do you want to introduce yourself and Parenting Across Scotland?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Amy and I'm the Chief Exec of Parenting Across Scotland, and we are a membership organisation, and our purpose is really to ensure that parents and carers are supported and valued in order that children can have the very best possible start in life. And I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming. So yeah, you obviously at Parenting Across Scotland, you're focused on parents and carers' rights and also their understanding of their own children's rights as well, I suppose. So what do you see as the importance of that? How is it important that parents feel empowered to understand their children's rights and how does that help them to be better parents?
Well, yeah, children's rights are really at the heart of everything that we do at Parenting Across Scotland, and we know, and you'll know really well yourselves and at Choir as well, how often parents are battling really hard to make sure that their children get access to the things that they need, whether that's education or healthcare, and really taking a child rights lens to this can really add power for parents and their children in order to realise their entitlements to what they should be getting in terms of education or support or healthcare. So we've been big advocates of children's rights for many, many years, and you'll know that it's been quite a process in Scotland in terms of how we make that happen. And this year we've now seen the incorporation of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child into Scots law, which makes these rights binding in law and gives extra powers if children's rights aren't being met to what's called remedy or redress, really resolution to problems if they exist. And this is so important for children and so important for their families as well, because most children, not all children live within the context of families, but most children do. And so if children's rights are being met, then that is within the context of their family. And the UNCRC includes things like rights to live with an adequate standard of living. So that includes things like not living in poverty. So action to address child poverty comes within the scope of the UNCRC. So really, we can use the UNCRC to push for a better life for all parents and carers and their children across Scotland, and particularly those that are experiencing particular disadvantage. So we celebrate the incorporation of the UNCRC into Scots law. I think it's a brilliant thing, and think it's really something that all parents and carers should know about, and children should certainly know about it as well, so that they can use it as a tool to make sure that their children are realising their rights. I'm not sure now whether all parents do know about it. Certainly some will. And certainly children are learning about it through schools, through the Rights, Respect and Schools scheme, for example. Hopefully bringing some of that home and telling their parents about it and their carers about it. But certainly one of the organisations we work with, Fathers Network Scotland, they've been asking dads about whether they know about the UNCRC, and levels of understanding about that with dads is really low. So there's a lot more to be done to make sure that all parents and carers know about children's rights. And I saw that you've got a blog series on your website about that.
Yeah, we've started a blog series about the UNCRC, and our comms team have been talking to different organisations all about the UNCRC and how they're enacting these rights that are now, like you say, enshrined in law. And it's been really interesting to see the breadth of different ways that people are learning about it, because like you say, if parents don't know that these rights exist or that they have the right to pursue things if they're not being met, then those rights aren't going to be met. So yeah, I think that like the knowledge is power line is definitely true. And that's, I guess, a lot of what Parenting Across Scotland is doing, is trying to get that knowledge to to parents and carers.
Yeah, and we're fortunate because we're a membership organisation, we can find out what's happening on the ground from our members and then use that to influence the Scottish Government and other decision makers and duty bearers, as they're called, that have the responsibility to making sure that they're enshrining children's rights in the work that they do. So yes, it is a process and a journey. Although we were, delighted in that it was enacted in July, it's going to take a while for all the processes to come into force and to work well. But yeah, we're thrilled to be part of that work to make sure that it happens and is a reality for children.
Yeah, definitely. I know one of the big things that you've done, kind of in line with that sharing of information, is the parent evidence review. Do you want to tell people a bit about that?
Yeah. So I came into post last October, and one of the first things I was curious about is what are parents and carers saying about their lives today? And we could have gone out and done some focus groups or a survey or something, but we thought, well, let's see what's already been published about parents' views and experiences. And we commissioned an organisation called The Lines Between to gather all that together, to look and see what was out there, gather it all together and to write it up into a report for us. We weren't really sure what we would find, but they found 28 bits of published research in 1 year in Scotland alone.
Loads.
That's quite a lot. And it covered the views and experiences of at least 4,000 parents and carers across 28 local authority areas. So it was much wider.
Yeah, 28 of 32 is
pretty
almost
good,
everywhere,
isn't it? I know. And it also included a lot of different groups of parents as well. So there was parents with children with disabilities, parents living in low-income families, refugee and asylum-seeking parents, parents with their children that were in the care system. So a lot of different perspectives on parenting as well were included in it. And it's been incredibly helpful for us. The main themes that came out of it are probably ones that you would expect. So there's a lot on poverty and living in low incomes. There's quite a bit on health and well-being, both of parents and the children, and on childcare, and then on education is the big theme that's in there as well.
Yeah, on the education point, was there anything that sort of stood out to you as really valuable information to have that collated evidence of?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that really stood out for me is different experiences of education. So there's a bit of research on refugee families and their experience of the education system, and what parents want from education system for their children when English isn't their first language, and how much they struggle to know how their children are getting on. And it's really simple stuff as well. So there was one parent that talks about, I just want to know that my child is settled in school and is okay and is able to work and learn. But because they didn't have English as a language, they weren't able to have that conversation with the teacher. So it was very, very simple things like that came out. So it's not always about big fundamental changes that are needed. It's sometimes remembering about the individual and actually how we give an individual response to big issues like education.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that we hear about on the helpline. One of the things that we offer at Enquire on the helpline is the language line is like a translation service that we use, so that if parents are calling and English isn't their first language, we can speak to them through a translator. And we know that's really valuable to parents that need it. But it must be so difficult to want to keep up with your child's education, but then have this huge barrier that, like you say, even I think teachers or school staff able to say hello and how are you and build some kind of relationship even while there is that barrier. But it's so valuable to be drawing from all those different experiences as well. I think from reading the report, one of the things that I took from it was the intersectionality of the whole collection of research seemed really broad, and it seemed like there was a lot of acknowledgement of actually we shouldn't be talking about all these different things separately. We should be thinking about them as how all these things do intersect. Definitely.
And that goes for the parents themselves, but also goes for the issues that they experience too. So although we have sections on poverty and health and well-being, they're so interconnected. And of course they impact on education as well. So when you can't really unpick them that way, you really do need to take a holistic view of how families are doing across all sorts of different domains. Have they got an adequate standard of living? Because if they don't, that's really going to affect their children's ability to do their best at school, and it's really going to have an impact on their mental health and well-being. So yeah, we need an intersectional lens in terms of how different inequalities impact on families, but we also need a holistic approach to how we address the issues that families are facing.
Yeah, that working together across different things is so valuable. I know we hear quite often at Enquire, people that are, if we're talking to parents and there's trouble at home, then that's impacting what's going on at school, so it's impacting their education, it's impacting their mental health, so they need to talk to CAMHS, mental health service, but then the school need to be informed of that, but the parents don't know what's going on. There can be a lot of cross-working, but it feels like across the sector and across sort of social services in general, it seems to be that there's this growing desire to work together and for things to be more.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess, that's the principles behind GIRFIC, getting it right for every child, that the whole child approach, and that team around the child, those are the principles that I guess we've had in Scotland for a long time and are still enshrined in policy and practice, and they take a child rights approach at the heart of GIRFIC, or there should be at least. So it should be second nature to us. However, there's lots of things that get in the way from that becoming a reality. And, you can't ignore the impact that budgets have on schools and how stretched they are at the moment and how they're pulled in so many different ways that take them away from doing that work. They would probably, most of them, the vast majority of them, want to be working in that way. Yeah. It just doesn't always happen like that.
No, definitely. And I think something like the evidence review that you've done will be really helpful for that understanding of how these things can work and how people are feeling. Sharing that across different sectors, because who is the intended audience for the evidence review? Where do you see it going?
Oh, well, we're using it for our policy and influencing work. So one of the things that we do at PAS is to try and make sure that national policy and practice is really focused on what parents and carers needs and their children as well. So having that evidence really adds legitimacy to our campaigns, because we can say, look, this is what parents are saying. And we really, when we were working with the lines between on it, we were like, we really want quotes in there. We want that first person perspective, because they're so powerful. And there's some, if you've read it, there's some quotes in there which are really upsetting because of some of the experiences that parents are having to deal with in terms of living in circumstances that are just not safe for children to be in. And they hit through really so much more powerfully than all the best written evidence, and
the statistics are useful, but they're not emotive, I guess, in the same way. Yeah. So you do a lot of policy work and that kind of thing at Parenting Across Scotland as well.
Yeah. So the areas that we tend to work in are around poverty, around children's rights, early years and whole family support. I can tell you a bit more about that.
Yeah.
And then the other area that we're working quite a lot in at the moment is about leisure and play, to make sure that children can take part in hobbies and have their rights to a cultural life and leisure.
Because that's one of the UNCRC
It
things,
is,
isn't it?
yes.
Yeah.
Article 31, I think. Hopefully I've got that one right.
Something like that.
Yeah, So, I think that's a really... I remember being asked once what my favourite article was, and I said that it was the right to play. I think that should be at the heart of every childhood. That can be really informal play, like mucking about with your friends, but also for me, that also includes the right to take part in hobbies and find your fun through group activities. And currently in Scotland, there's lots and lots of hobbies available, but a lot of them have a cost attached to them. And so children miss out, and we think that's unfair. So we're doing a lot of work to try and increase access to hobbies for children and young people.
Yeah. Tell me more about the play thing, because I suppose when you look at the UNCRC, there's so many. Well, they are all fundamental rights, but like when you look at the breadth of them, what is it about play that you think, for children, I guess especially, is so valuable?
Oh gosh,
it's a big question.
So many ways. So if you look at sort of all the evidence on how children develop, then play is like a super powerful way of helping them to develop when they're very young. In terms of their motor neuron skills, their motor, fine motor skills.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need to do that bit again.
No, don't worry.
You know, their ability to interact with other people. You know, there's just lots and lots of ways in which they learn through play is just super powerful. And then as you get older, it can have other benefits as well. It has numerous mental health benefits, for example. So if you think about something that you enjoy doing, I know you like to play the guitar.
Yeah.
If you really get into that zone, you get into, you know, where you're just totally absorbed in what you're doing and you're playing music, you get into a psychological state that's called flow. Where you're being creative and you're relaxed and you're engaged. And that state, there's lots of evidence that shows it's really, really good for mental health and well-being. So if you're struggling, if you're stressed, if you're anxious, getting into that state of flow, if you can get yourself into that state of flow, it's going to do you lots of good. And play does that. Yeah. And if you find your thing, if you find your hobby, for example, that you love, and the thing that you enjoy doing, if you're struggling with school or other parts of your life aren't going so well, this is an area where it should be a really positive place for you to be. So it provides that, what's called, I guess, protective factor as well. It protects you from the damaging impacts of other parts of your life where that might not be working so well for you.
Yeah, you're feeling, you know, accomplished, or you're having joy or whatever.
Exactly,
all these positive things.
Exactly.
And I think that fits with, at Enquire we do a lot of stuff. So one of the things that we do at Enquire is we work with the Inclusion Ambassadors, which are a group of young people with additional needs from across Scotland, and they talk to us about various different things about their time at school and what's working well and what's not working. And one of the things that's come out of that work is the importance of and the value of things at school that are outside of the academic, outside of exam results. The Inclusion Ambassadors have come up with an award called the Success Looks Different Award that's based on that idea that school should be and is about so much more than, you know, the result you get in 5th or 6th year in your hires or in your Nat 5s. And I think that kind of the hobbies stuff kind of aligns with that, building those other skills, because I think also hobbies and that fun can build so many other things like social skills and personal interests and, you know, all these different things that can come from it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think those awards are brilliant, and it's so lovely to see good practice being celebrated as well. Sometimes we can get so stuck, or my sort of work can get so stuck on where things are going wrong, that it's really nice, and it's wonderful it's been designed by young people as well. So it's such a positive scheme that. And but they're absolutely right. I mean, what do we want schools to be about? We you know, learning and attainment is certainly part of it. We're not going to say that it's not, but we want children to have a rounded experience, to be nurtured, to become who they are as human beings, really. And that involves allowing them to try different things out without too much pressure, so that they can go down blind alleys and go, actually, I tried that, but it's not for me. I'm going to try something else, and be encouraged to feel confident about exploring options in a safe way. Yeah,
definitely. So sort of coming around, I guess, to education, obviously that's the focus for us at Enquire is children's rights in the education setting, rights to support at school. In your work and from what you hear from parents and carers from the review and from the other things that you're involved in, are there sort of key themes or key concerns, or maybe positives or negatives about education that you hear about a lot?
Oh yeah, definitely. And as well as Parenting Across Scotland being a member of Children in Scotland and vice versa. So we hear things from Enquire for sure. We also talk with other organisations that work with parents in relation to education, like Connect, or we've had good connections with a Give Them Time campaign, which is about starting school at a slightly later age, and they've been really successful with that. It's a huge issue. I mean, I don't think there'll be many families where education isn't a big concern for them. Even if things are going well, it's still important, isn't it? Because it's a place where children spend most of their days, or no, not most of their time, but certainly most of their days. And you know, it's important. Parents want their children to have a good experience of education and to do well in it. But that doesn't always happen for various different reasons. So yes, we hear a lot about, I guess, particularly where children with additional support needs aren't properly supported within school contexts, and how difficult that is for the children. And of course, we hear about how difficult that is for the families and for the parents, and the impact that that has on them and their ability to feel like they're doing their best job by the children when they're having to manage many different things. So as well as thinking about their children's education, managing employment, their whole living circumstances, relationships,
finances, healthcare, and
exactly, everything, and how overwhelming that can be sometimes, and maybe just don't have enough in the tank in order to feel like they're doing any of it justice. And that's just not a position that any parent, I don't think, wants to be in, where they feel that they're not able to do their best in whatever they're doing, but particularly in that parenting role. So we do hear a lot about that, work with other organisations about actually how do we resolve this, because there's been lots of emphasis. I don't think anybody would deny that children in an ideal world will be getting more support in school. I think you find it hard pressed to find anybody who would think that that's not needed.
No one would be mad if people were getting more support in lots of areas, but education, definitely.
Exactly, but it's the how do we actually make that a reality is the bit that we get stuck on, isn't it? So, and lots of people say that it's not the policy or the legislation that's at fault either, because that's pretty reasonable and good. It's the implementation of it, it's money, it's resources, it's approaches within schools where action is still required. And undoubtedly it's a huge task, and you'll know much more about that than us, I suppose, where we can play a part as not a specialist organisation, because we work across different policy areas, is really just being allies and advocates and say, look, education is such an important part of parents' whole lives and of children's whole lives that it has to be considered. When we were talking earlier about the impact and the interaction between poverty and health and education, for example, well, education needs to be considered within the context of anything to do with poverty and mental health policy, then, because it's such a big part of the picture. So I guess it's maybe drawing those connections. That's maybe where we can play a particular part, and learn from other organisations that are doing the specialist work like Inquire is doing.
Yeah, definitely. I think as a membership organisation, you can draw from so many different places and then present that collective view and find those common themes, because I think it is about supporting people in that progress to be understood. I guess we have to understand what the problems are before we can do stuff about them, but it feels like there's lots of people working quite hard to do something about them, and I think Parenting Across Scotland is definitely one of those. I guess then my sort of last proper question is about those relationships for parents from your perspective at Parenting Across Scotland. It is a really difficult thing. Education is a huge topic, and I think if you're a parent, I think it's quite easy to forget that for a lot of parents that's the first time they're having to involve themselves in education since they were at school themselves, managing those relationships and the frustrations if things aren't working. What would your advice be, or what do you think Parenting Across Scotland can help parents and carers to understand more about how they can manage those situations?
Yeah, I might want to flip that question, if that's all right, as I think it might be, I could say more about what organisations and education and professionals should do in order to make themselves more accessible to parents and carers, because I think there's definitely, each party has to move forward together, don't they? So it really requires education to be open and willing and wanting to have that conversation and support parents to feel able to come to them. So I would really probably think it should start from that point, really. And I guess what's coming to mind is our work that we're doing just now on open kindergarten, which might seem of a bit of a tangent. So the open kindergarten approach is for early years. and it is about how parents can be supported within early years settings.
Right.
And it comes from Sweden and other Nordic countries, and it's quite well established there. And we've been working with Midlothian Sure Start and a couple of universities and children in Scotland to pilot the approach in Scotland and see how it could work in early year settings in Scotland. So Midlothian Sure Start have been doing this with us. And what happens is that they have what's called open kindergarten and sessions, and it's a drop-in session where parents can come with their small children and the children can play and the parents can talk to each other, and there's a worker there that will facilitate that peer support and then bring in specialists if there's particular areas that they feel like they need additional support with. So some of the things, for example, that they've talked about that they've done recently is that some of the children are being weaned or weaning or going through that process of moving to solid foods. And the one parent was quite worried about choking risks. And so they brought in first aid training for them all so that they would know what to do in an emergency. And so it's just that kind of reactive and responsive, and also the openness of it as well, I think, is really key, so that it's not, you don't need a referral, it's not stigmatising, it's just there for anybody, you're just...
if you've got a question, then...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or if you just want to come just to have a cup of tea and for your children to play and just to get a bit of socialisation out the house, it's there for you as well. And the feedback from parents is amazing. Well, for some, it's the only thing that they do, the only place that they go, because they can't afford anything else, or there's just it's just impossible to get other types of support. And the fact that it's just parents helping out each other is just such a really nice positive thing for them as well. And I suppose it's got so much potential, and we're thinking about it very much in terms of the early years. But oh gosh, wouldn't it be nice to have things like that in schools as well, wouldn't it? Where there was like parents, opportunities for parents just to hang out and speak to each other and get a bit of support within the context of schools. Maybe there is.
Yeah, I think
we should find out if there is.
I would hope there is in some places. I think it definitely, that speaks to a lot of what we hear on the helpline and through our work at Enquire, is this, fear is maybe a strong word, but parents and carers being afraid to ask questions because they don't want to appear like they don't know what's happening, or they're trying to stand up for their children and they want to do it the right way, but they're not sure how to go about it. Or if you've never been to a meeting with a head teacher before, that might be quite scary. Like I've never done that. I don't know how I would feel about that, but you feel like you maybe have to go in with all the answers already, when actually I think creating that culture where parents and carers are allowed to ask questions, and I think similarly that professionals are allowed to ask questions of the parents, because we talk a lot to parents. I suppose we talk to professionals as well about, like, everybody involved in a child's life will have expertise or understanding that is valuable. So I think for schools and professionals, parents and carers can bring so much to the table. Like, that they live with their children most of the time, or they spend a lot of time with them. They know a lot about them. Why aren't schools taking on some of that learning? I think in a lot of cases they do, but similarly, professionals have lots of insight to share about, their time at school, or the things that they're doing at nursery or whatever that the parents can build on. And I think it feels like there's recently across the sector a move towards that working together and that shared, like the team around the child meeting is a famous saying, but it feels like people are starting to actually act on that a bit more and let parents and carers be involved, but also give them the space to not know.
And it's something a bit less formal than like parent councils or where there's a lot of business to go through. And it's not so heightened around specific issues or problems. It's more just in general. And I think I think there's huge potential for that. And I think that shared understanding and that mutual understanding and a positive problem-solving kind of attitude would be, really welcome, if there was space for it. I think, we could all do with that, couldn't we?
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. Well, my final question to you would be, and I suppose most of the time you're speaking to parents and carers, so is there a piece of advice, I know it's very hard to narrow it down, if you had to give parents and carers one piece of advice about their rights or their children's rights, what would you tell them?
Well, if it's to do with education, for sure it would be get onto the Inquirer website or give
Thank you
Inquirer
very much. Yeah, appreciate it. From, I guess, then the children and young people's perspective, what would you tell children about their own rights? What's it important for them to know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it really is important for them to know about their rights because these are things that are inalienable, which means they can't be taken away from you. And they're lifelong and they are what you're entitled to.
Yeah.
So, don't feel scared about standing up for your rights. Get support if you need it. It's not up to you as well to make sure that if you're having a problem somewhere that you're solving it yourself. You're entitled to support in order to help you to do that.
Yeah.
But you are entitled to support and it is important. And there's lots of adults that feel very strongly that you should be getting the support that you need as well. So take confidence from that.
Yeah, definitely. Perfect. That's a great answer. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people find out more about you and your organisation?
Our website is www.parentingacrossscotland.org. Or you can find us on LinkedIn or that Twitter/X platform. And probably anywhere where children in Scotland are Inquirer are hanging out, we'll be there as well.
Yeah, definitely. If anybody is listening and would like to know more about Inquire, you can find us at Inquire Reach ASL everywhere, and then inquire.org.uk, and our website for young people, reach.scot.